Viewing life from a hearse, it could be worse. Laugh, think, and cry with the country undertaker.
I've got Bob Pisano online with me today, and his wife, Betty Ann. She said she may chime in, and she may not, but these are, Bob is my colleague, former colleague. I'm retired, but he is my friend from New York. He's another one of these bona fide New Yorkers talking to this country undertaker from rural Georgia. Bob, I want to be sure you can hear me. Say hello.
Hey there. Hello, Bruce.
Good.
Nice to be with you again.
Okay.
Obviously, and nice to have Betty Ann with us too.
Yes, nice to see you, Betty Ann. I can see them on the screen. You people listening can't, but it sure makes the picture look better with Betty Ann sitting there. I can.
Thanks. Same here.
Thank you. So, Bob, I'll never forget. In 2010, I was flying into New York City, and I'd been to New York City, but I'd certainly never been there on business. And I had just been promoted to a pretty big position. And as we were going to LaGuardia to meet you at your office in Long Island City, which was in Queens. We flew over Manhattan, and I'm looking down at the city. And I'm thinking, this is a long way from Reynolds, Georgia. It just hit me. If I could do this job, this country guy from Georgia can fly into New York City and meet all of your team and be successful in this environment, I can do anything. And I can't imagine what you thought. We knew each other. It was not like we'd never met. We'd been in meetings. We'd been around. I'd been with the company 12 years at that point. I do feel like I had a little cash in the bank with you before I walked in, because you and I both know that our mentor and the guy that got you in this company, Steve Mack, is the one that promoted me. And so you had to think, this guy must have some ability if Steve Mack put him here. That was what I was thinking. But I'll never forget, an hour or so after flying over Manhattan, I walked in your office, which was the Market Support Center in New York City.
Bruce, that was a good way to start, because we really met at one of these Atlanta management meetings, and we were doing some training. So maybe we had some different courses. Mac was there. And you were participating in one of our finance team meetings. It was financial review and how to identify red flags in financials. So your trip to New York was kind of very special in a way that New York, New York is a beautiful song. And New York back then was a beautiful city. Today is a different arena. Today is a different environment that we know New York with post-COVID and all this changes going on. But when you came into New York, it's a big city, and you being a big guy, you fit right into it. But the culture of where you came from is a little different.
A lot of different, yeah.
What I remember is that we had the team come together, and you stood up and you gave a great introduction about yourself. You made everybody feel comfortable. You made everybody feel at home. And they asked you a few questions. And the most memorable moment that I had was when you started telling them about, hey, I'm always prepared. I'm always willing to accept a challenge. And you rattled off your basketball story about trying to always practice. You practiced 1,000 times shooting the ball, shooting, so that you would convince your coach that whenever there was a need for being at the end of the game, down to the wire, and you needed somebody to shoot, give me the ball.
Right.
Give me the ball, okay? I'm taking the shot. And that resonated with me. And you know what came out of that? Is that your management style, your leadership style is such that I am willing to take the challenge and take the risk in the moment whenever that arises. And you were prepared for it mentally, physically, and emotionally. And that was a strong point that you got across by using a basketball scenario.
So, the point I was saying, I also said that day, is To win, you got to be willing to lose. I wanted the ball when the game was on the line, but it was okay if I missed it. But I knew I was prepared to take the shot, and I knew that I'd been in this business all my life, and I'd been with the company 12 years, and I'd been operating funeral homes from Salt Lake City to Oklahoma City and all the way back. This was a new deal because of the culture of New York and the Northeast, that my country self coming in. So it was a different thing for me, but I was prepared to be there. I knew that I did in high school, shot 1,000 times a day one summer to get ready to play, and I had shot 1,000 times. I was ready, and I wanted to get that point across. I'm different, but I'm not nervous about being in this position. So the other thing that I quickly picked up on in that meeting, for me to be successful, and I didn't know that till I got in there, and I did know you, and we'd met, and it's not like you were a stranger, but I picked up before I left there that the key to my success would be you. You had a heck of a lot of knowledge. I had no idea of the persistence you had. I had really no idea of the positive outlook, but it was evident to me that you were going to be my key to being successful in this whole new gig. And you were my key, and I saw two things in you. Now, this is as I look back, and I wasn't thinking about that the first day. I'm not that smart. But as I look back, there are two things. You were the most positive person I've ever met in my life. Every email you sent, every conversation ended with, "It's all good." And we would have some robust conversations, and you know that. I mean, I've got my mind, you got your mind. We didn't get to do what we're doing by being yes men. we would lay it out. That bled over into me because by nature, my daddy was a worrier. I mean, if he didn't have anything to worry about, he would think up something to worry about. And I had some of that in me, but your positive outlook bled over to me. And I know it's bled over to everybody that you work with and influence, which has been a ton of people in your life. I'm just one on the phone. So I wonder how many people that have all the talent in the world don't really make it because they always think they can't do it. The second thing that I picked up on as I look back is that you were so persistent. There are people that set a goal and they start doing it and then they cool off a little bit, but you're the most persistent person I've ever met. Those two things, and I know there's more, but those two things as I look back jump out at me. And so here we had this guy from rural Georgia and a guy from New York that was an accountant, and we'll talk about that in a minute, that a heck of a lot smarter than me, I can tell you that. But we formed this great relationship, and we proved that you don't have to be from the same culture to make a great team. You don't have to have the same even belief system or whatever. You can be two completely different people from two completely parts of the world and work together and do very good. And boy, that's a lesson in life right there in itself, right?
Well, you mentioned two things, the positive attitude and perseverance. Throughout my whole life, I've been very competitive. Okay. And the sports analogy, playing a lot of sports, I developed that competitiveness, but to be competitive in a fair and equitable way and in a good way. Okay. But the competitive drive in playing sports, in high school, basketball, baseball, soccer, co-captains of the teams. So that competitive drive is within me. And I took that sports perspective and put it into business. So the persistence, the perseverance is an attribute that comes about of being competitive, but in a business environment that's different. On the field, basketball court, in a soccer field or a baseball field, it's a different form of competitiveness versus being competitive in a business environment, in a work environment, in a work setting. So you have to bring the dynamic into the arena of the work environment, but geared toward work. So the competitive nature is the perseverance of getting it done, right? Just let's get it done. To be a leader, this whole outlook of a positive perspective is one that people are not going to follow a person that has got a negative tone. People are not going to follow someone that sees the cup half empty. people are not going to follow someone that doesn't portray what the vision is or what the outcome is. So in order to be a better, effective leader, or in order to be a leader that is respected, you earn that respect through demonstrating to people, we have a better vision. We have an outcome that's going to be better for us. We have the direction we're going in that's going to be better. So when you pull that thread and bring that vision together, the leadership skill gets stronger. The leadership skill becomes more effective, so that the achieving the desired outcome makes it easier, because now you have associates or team members that are working in the same direction with you, are pulling on the oar the same way. And therefore, you become an effective leader by demonstrating positive attitude, which then gets you better results through all the people you interact with. So there's a joint connection to the two of those things that make it more powerful. If I were to want someone to know about me, like what are the qualities about Bob Pisano, right? And you'll see that as we go through the rest of our conversation. And there's a theme that, this is who Bob is. This is who I am, right? So the first thing, number one to notice, is that in the work environment, my name is recognized as Bob, right? But outside of work, my real name is Robert. They go by Robert. Betty Ann calls me Robert.
I never
my
knew that.
call me Robert, right? So a new development, or a new twist for you. So you keep calling me Bob, and that's right, because on the work environment, I don't know how the hell I started with this back in my Arthur Young days and Merrill Lynch days, but I got started. What's my name? What's your name? Bob. Well, but on the outside, it's Robert. So either one works for me. Okay. So,
never knew that. Learn something new every day.
Right. Number one, Bruce, I'm a family man. I'm a family person, which is very important. And I believe you are too, okay? Yep. That you make reference to your family and your children. But I'm a family person is embedded in my DNA, right? But the other characteristics are, being energetic, being, determined to your point of perseverance, to being loyal. And I think out of this vision and leadership role, I become a mentor. It's nice to know that I can have an impact on people, even though I don't necessarily have a direct responsibility to them. They're not a direct line to me. I have the ability to influence them. Those 5 qualities of family man, energetic, being a mentor, being determined, and loyal sort of frame out who Robert Pisano is, AKA Bob. Okay.
Yeah, I agree 100% with all 5 of them. I know you pretty well, so I 100% agree with what you said.
I had, start out with a childhood. I had a beautiful childhood. I had a great childhood. My grandparents, I really come from, and so does Betty Ann, more of an Italian-American or an American-Italian background. My grandparents, my father's side, my grandparents on my mother's side came from Italy, Naples area. I did not get a chance to get to know my father's parents that well, because my grandmother had passed away before I was born, and my grandfather passed away only a few years after that, but when I was born. But I did know my mother's parents very, very well. So growing up was dynamite. My brother Anthony, 2 years older than me, we lived in a small town called Pelham Manor, New York. Okay, I was born, bred, and raised in Pelham Manor. And now Betty Ann and I live not too far from there. And my father still lives in the same house that I grew up in. So, but it was a good upbringing, very good upbringing. Good parents. My father was a hard worker, electrician. I learned how to training on the job. He tried to teach me to become an electrician. In the summer times, I slept at my grandparents' house. My grandfather had a store at the Bronx Terminal Market, right down from Yankee Stadium. So my uncle would pick us up at 5:30 in the morning, and we'd get there, and I'd be able to work with him. So I learned from my grandfather what it's like to have relationships with people, what it's like to sell in the store. And I worked my butt off, but it was exciting. I was a young guy, and if my grandfather didn't keep me busy in his store, he sent me over to the tomato guy on the right side or the fruit guy on the left side. And they said, this kid is available to help, move some cartons and whatnot. So my mother worked hard. My father worked hard, and my mother took care of my brother and I. She was a great cook, good meals all the time, coming back home from school, from playing sports. So, and that was good. It was really good. And that foundation, when we were growing up with, Sundays, dinners, pasta dinners at my grandparents or our house, holidays, birthday parties in our basements, everybody's birthday party. Holidays, go and visit my father to his brothers and sister, seeing them in the holiday time. So I saw the value of family solidified between my parents, and they helped that quite a bit.
And then when you started to go to school, to go to college, tell me how that came about.
I graduated from Pelham Memorial High School, and by the way, my mother graduated from the same school when she moved out of Harlem from when she was a young girl. So it's cool enough that my mother and I are alumni. But I played a lot of sports in high school: soccer, basketball, baseball. Co-captain of the teams, and I became president of the junior class. So the first couple of years in high school, I started to develop that leadership trait a little bit as a co-captain of the three teams. And then I played a lot of ball afterwards, softball, basketball, baseball. I even played semi-professional soccer for about 10 years. And when I graduated high school, I became a volunteer fireman for the town of Pelham Manor. So I became the treasurer. So all of a sudden, my universe got expanded. Now I'm finishing up high school, and I'm going to be going to college, right? And I joined the volunteer fire department because my best friend, his father was the chief. So I got recruited, right? You just got recruited into this thing. It was a beautiful experience. I mean, it was the best thing. I tried to get my kids into that because it was a group of 40 guys and fighting fires and training and working together. So the bridge between high school and college for me was, there was the Vietnam War at the time. So my father tried to get me into becoming an electrician, but I said, no, I'd rather go to college. So going to college, I automatically got a deferment of not being drafted. And by the way, my draft number was 45. My volunteer fire badge was 45. And the house that we purchased later on after Betty Ann and I got married is 45 Rose Avenue. So 45 is a number in our thing. And I always play that number when we play the roulette wheels. But in order for me to get to school, my father bought me a 69 Malibu coupe, blue, metallic blue, white interior, bucket seats. It's a muscle car.
Right.
Well, so that car I was able to use to go back and forth to school. But the beauty of that car, Bruce, is that car is now still in my father's garage, and the car is in pristine condition. That is a classic. Wow. So I value things.
You still have the vehicle. Unbelievable.
I still have the 69 Malibu. I'll send you a picture.
What year did you graduate from high school?
High school graduated 69 and college 73.
Okay.
The thing about college was that I went to Iona College, which at that time was a small business. It was a small business school, and only male students. And the first year was that females started coming in 1970. Well, AKA enters Betty Ann.
So she was one of the female students. Right.
She was one of the first female, along with so now the odds were that you had 100% guys and about 10% girls. These are the girls that wanted to break the ice and come to an all boys college, right? So the reason why Betty Ann got to Iona College was that my mother-in-law, to be, was the assistant librarian at Iona College, and I was always in the library. But I went to Iona, majored in business, figured out an accounting was maybe up my alley, finished up with my accounting there. But that's where I met Betty Ann. We met at a mixer. Then it's all history. So every time I was going into the library, I was just studying my back off. I used to study a lot. When I would study, Betty Ann would come up and think she was given the impression she was working there as like a student working at the school in the library. she was like filing books back on the shelves, so she was thumbing around where I was.
You were watching and she was watching.
Yeah, right.
That's wonderful. Wonderful.
But that's how. So I got to college, finished up college, and that's when Betty Ann and I started dating more. And then fast forward, Betty Ann's been with me for 55 years, and we've been married for 46 years.
Unbelievable. So, and your kids. Talk about your kid.
Betty Ann, just mention who are two boys. Let's tell Bruce.
Yeah, Betty Ann, chime in.
Our first son is Robbie, or Rob now. He's 40. He'll be 45 in June. And our second son is Jeffrey, and he'll be 43 in June. We have two very successful and handsome boys.
Yep, and they've done very well in life, right?
They have.
Yeah, they've been very fortunate, Bruce. Jeffrey is in the real estate world. Robbie is in the finance, Wall Street capital markets world. So they both went to school. They have both Iona College graduates. So I'm a graduate of Iona. They're graduates of Iona. So it's good there. Betty Ann has a different degree from Iona. You know what? She completed 3+ years, and her final degree was an MRS degree.
So that was it, MRS.
MRS, that's right.
Mrs.
So,
yeah.
Right. But yeah, both sons are doing well, and they both live in our town, same area. We now live in Eastchester, New York, which is not far from Pelham, where my father still lives. So one lives up the block, and the other lives on the other side of town. So, and we're blessed with 6 grandsons, ages 16 to 7. And the oldest son is Robert Michael III.
That's
so
awesome.
We got a third in there.
So talk about your professional life. You graduated with an accounting degree, and then you did what? What were you doing?
I was very fortunate with Iona College that there was an internship program in the world of public accounting. And I just would add that when I graduated Iona, the draft stopped. Right. That was the first year the Vietnam draft stopped. So I was very fortunate. I think, again, there's another thing in life, Bruce, that probably just is worth mentioning. There are things that happen that, sometimes we get a little lucky and sometimes we get unlucky, right? And we'll talk about my unluckiness later on, but I was fortunate that the Vietnam draft stopped at the year I graduated college.
And I was a freshman at the University of Georgia in '72. And I turned 18 in September of '72, so I had to register for the draft the day I turned, and I got a number as well. It was like 100 and something, but I don't remember the number. Like it wasn't 45, but it was down a little bit. But it stopped, so I had the same situation. Had to register, didn't know what was going to happen, but it stopped, so I never got drafted as well. So I remember one of the first things I had to do at Georgia was to go register for the draft.
Yeah, so you think about that moment, right? That cloud over our heads. So we were fortunate that the draft stopped.
Right.
But as part of the Iona College program was in the world of business and accounting, there was an internship program. So I was fortunate to get an internship. I made sure my grades were good. That's an important thing, just to focus on getting good, having good grades. So I was able to get an internship with Arthur Young, and that was a 3-month program. Got paid. And it was it was beautiful. And they offered me a job. So after college, I then went with Arthur Young and Company. It's a big 8 accounting firm at the time on Park Avenue. Spent 5 years with there. And one of my most prestigious clients was PepsiCo. So I frankly thought at one point I'd get a job with PepsiCo. I spent 5 years in public accounting, traveled throughout the country, did some big audits in New York, outside of New York, some great companies. I learned quite a bit about accounting. It really solidified my accounting and business knowledge. But I also figured out that I did not want to be a public accountant. It's a different world. So I obtained a job at Merrill Lynch Realty. After 5 years in Arthur Young, I then joined Merrill Lynch. And Merrill Lynch was a dynamic company, exciting. I joined there as an accounting manager in the relocation business, moving 10,000 people, relocating 10,000 people a year. IBM, Xerox. I was the accounting manager. And that grew to the residential realty company where we bought over 2,000 real estate firms. And then that grew to a mortgage banking company where we were doing over $100 million a month in mortgages. And it grew to establishing a portfolio, a $5 billion portfolio in La Jolla, California that I spent 6 months. So my career at Merrill Lynch of 10 years was one of an accounting manager, a treasurer, and director of accounting. And that was an exciting, fast-paced, and competitive, very, very political. And I use that word loosely in this moment because I'm going to come back to that thought later on. But Merrill Lynch decided to diversify from this realty business. And I did not want to be a part of that diversification. I'd rather have stayed with Merrill. But the bottom line is I changed. I changed to become an executive, senior executive vice president of a Dollar Dry Dock Bank. So at that point, I thought my career was going to go down the path of being Wall Street, financial institutions. And I did the job with Dollar Dry Dock. All of a sudden, I got a call from the former controller at Merrill Lynch Realty. He said, "Bob, we need a controller of our new company called Sentinel." Jerry Pullins left Merrill Lynch, and I met Jerry Pullins in Merrill Lynch. Jerry Pullins, I worked with him in the relocation business, the residential business, and the mortgage banking business. Jerry started a business, got venture capital money, and started Sentinel, buying funeral homes and cemeteries. Met with those guys and joined them shortly thereafter, and spent 4 years with Sentinel as a controller, and then Sentinel sold to Service Corporation International, and SCI has been 30 years, 3 decades, all positions of VP of Finance, Eastern Region VP of Finance, Eastern Division VP of Finance, North America VP of Finance, and then the creation of the Market Support Center, and then special projects in these last couple of years. So my 50-year careers have been with principally 3 companies, 3 operations, and I've been blessed to have been in the competitive environments of these companies and being successful.
What a story, Bob. What a story.
As part of being the accounting firm, I also became a CPA. So I became a certified public accounting, which distinguishes me from others, but it doesn't make me any different than other accountants. Now, you can still be an accountant, CPA. It's all a matter of the person and the ability and the skill that you bring to the table. So in order for me to have advanced further, though, I determined that it was best that I obtain this certificate.
So I was just last week or 2 weeks ago, I was on a call on our WebEx where you were celebrating your 30 years with SCI. Just to hear the stories of the people, some of them, you certainly couldn't get them all, but you had a few people on the line hearing the stories. That had to be very rewarding. You're looking back a little bit, especially what you've been through health-wise, that we're going to talk a little bit, but that was very moving to me to listen to it. Talk about maybe a couple of defining moments you've had with SCI. That may be an unfair question. I know you've had many.
The way you introduced this thought was pretty cool, and that is there were a lot of people on the call that were reflecting on their interaction with me, the relationship that I had with them. But it was what was additionally exciting, Bruce, not only to have you and all the others on the call, but 2 of my grandsons were listening in. Betty Ann was listening in, and my son, daughter-in-law, and my 99-year-old dad. How fortunate am I to have my father be around to listen in on how successful his son has been in working with people, and how blessed am I to have Betty Ann and my grandchildren and son and daughter-in-law listening in on this as well. So it kind of really made that whole session even more powerful and more effective and beautiful.
Yeah, and the reality is 10 years ago, that wouldn't have mattered as much to you as it does now, because you can't help to be our age. You're looking back, you get a little bit of encouragement that you've done something right, a heck of a lot right. Betty Ann, you listening to that had to mean a lot to you as well, as you heard these people from really all over the country, but to hear that had to be moving to you as well, right?
It was very moving.
Yeah.
Because as you know, he traveled 90% of the time. So he would come home and tell me stories, but hearing from people from the company and knowing a lot of them, it was very special to us to hear about Robert.
Yeah.
And especially after all he's been through with his medical situation, it was really a special moment for all of us.
This, I was telling my wife the purpose of me doing these podcasts is I'm having fun. It's a hobby, and I got a lot of people listening to this. But more than anything, I'm documenting people that I have met that have influenced me for my children and grandchildren to listen to one day. That is my motive. And you are certainly one of those people I want my kids, after I'm long gone, to know what made Dad like he is. Well, we meet some of these people. I'm talking to them. You can hear the stories. And
What SCI has been a tremendous career for me, Bruce, and it's been very exciting. I've had interesting at Merrill Lynch. We grew fast and furious, and a very political environment. Right? You can envision that a little bit. And so when I got to SCI, by the way, SCI, Jerry Pollins, when we sold Sentinel to SCI, Jerry Pollins introduced me to Steve Mack, and I interviewed with Steve and a few other people, and he said, "Listen, I don't know anything about you, but I hear good things, so I'm going to give you a temporary position." So I had an option of either do I stay involved as an outside investor and have stock in the company and be passive, or do I take this temporary position and be active? Well, I said, you know what? I'm going to be active because I think I can prove to this person, Steve, that I am capable of making a contribution. Well, fast forward, six months became now 30 years, right? 3 decades. Right?
Wow.
But the moments throughout the career with SCI, I would say the first thing, which you alluded to a little bit, is working 20 years with Steve Mack. I mean, that in and of itself, around him, with him, he and I developed not just a employee to boss relationship. That didn't even exist. We developed a partnership. We developed a strong relationship. We developed a friendship it was almost like my brother, okay? And I could always be myself. And what Steve saw in me was the ability to make a difference from the financial angle of things, from being like he used to call me once in a while, like my sergeant of arms. So let's get Pisano involved. Just what does Bob think, right? What would Bob want us to do here? Or let's have Bob look into that. So working with him over 20 years was a powerful experience in all of SCI. And I learned quite a bit from him. Like I learned from you what the funeral industry is all about, how to serve customers. That was a big attribute with you. What I learned from Steve was the bridging between what's good for the family and what's good for the company. He could see the big company picture as well as knowing the business operations. Right. So that in of itself was a milestone. A few other ones were something like, I was asked by the training department to assist in developing the old area vice president. Remember the AVP position?
Yep.
Developed the AVP training, and then I became a trainer. So I worked with Donna, if I don't recall her last name, but we
Donna Hastings.
Donna Hastings, right, Bruce? Right. Yeah. Well, so I worked with Donna and that training team, and then they were saying, well, who the hell can teach all this? And they all looked at me and says, there's only one person that I know could teach it. The guy that had the most impact on this was Pisano. But the first people I was teaching it to was Mac and Blair Waltrip and the other senior officers of the company, which was a tough thing. And at the end of the day, Blair would say, let's go for it. We're going forward on this program, dynamite. So that was another one.
I actually went to the AVP school. That was one of my first things. And wow, that's been a few years ago, but I was part of that.
The whole restructure around major, Main Street, Middle, and MSC, the 7 of us, 8 of us got together for months and developed the most significant restructure of the company. And that's how I became the leader of the Market Support Center in East. And I guess the last thing is that I was involved in developing, which getting some guidance from you, was the 1,500 location websites. So lots of dynamite career successes with SCI, and continues to be. And I'm pleased and fortunate with Elizabeth in her role that she's able to find me things to work on that I can make a difference, given my knowledge of the company and my knowledge of in the bowels of the organization and all the positive relationships that I have with so many people. So pretty good.
If the company wanted something that they had to get done, you were the man they called. There's no question. So, Bob, before we start talking about your health and stuff, I want to talk about that because I think that's a great lesson in that. But I know we've got some funny stories that's happened over the years. We worked hard, but we also had fun doing it, right?
We had lots of fun, Bruce. I tell you, you're such a dynamic person, okay? And you're so passionate about things, and you have a good knack about bringing a balance of work and fun. In the middle of that, as complicated as things are, you have a way of making things simple. This is not a complicated business, but we have complicated systems, we have complicated processes, we got people's complications around all this stuff, but you have a way of tying it together in a nice little bow that makes it simple for people to understand. One of the best recollections I have, which I would view this as a best practice for a management development team, that is the bus story. So when we first met, this is cool. When we first met and you had your new position and we were coming around together, you say, Bobby, you always call me Bobby. Bobby, I'm not sure who's going to be on our team. I'm not sure how we're going to do this.
You hear that, Marianne? We've gone from Robert to Bob to Bobby now. Go ahead.
So Betty Ann knows this a little bit. I've told her this story because I think it's so cool. You use a means to develop a very powerful, strong team, and it's the bus story. So the bus story goes like this. Bruce has got to figure out which people want to be part of the team. So if you're being part of the team, you can get on the bus. The key is that the bus is going to be big and that Bruce is the bus driver of the bus. So, and if you want to join the team and get on the bus, Bruce and I are going to filter, are you really the right person to get on the bus?
Are you on the right seat on the bus?
Get on the right seat on the bus, right? And if you didn't make the first cut, right, then you don't get on the bus. And if you don't make the second cut, you don't get on the bus. So the whole idea was, as he traveled throughout the whole country, all of his markets, meeting all the people, the idea was, are you on our team or you're not on our team? And if you are on the team, let's get on the bus. And you're going to drive with me through you're going to be part of this journey on the bus. So I look at this as an acumen of way that you were able to build a strong and productive management team through a simple concept of it's getting on the bus.
You know, I also remember, you made me remind me that we were having to create a sales organization because it was very fragmented in this Main Street thing, and it couldn't be like the rest of the company. We were so scattered out, and I took that analogy, but I took it to that I'm driving a sales bus, and I don't have anybody on the bus. This ain't gonna work with just me driving it. We need people. We got to figure out to get people on this sales bus, or we're gonna crash this bus.
The other thing about working with you, Bruce, is you like to see people laugh. You like to see people have fun because you keep on telling us it's healthy. It is. It's very healthy and wise to laugh and have fun. And you did that with all of your management meetings, as much as the management team meetings that you put together and we had. You always had like a break in the action. You always had some time off, and whatever that was. But the one of most remembers, we were in Atlanta over there, that we were at a nice outside place. They had capabilities for fishing and tennis and golf and relaxing. So it had a couple of different options, and people signed up for each one. So the end result was that you, Bird, nickname Bird, Bird. Gary, Toy, and I, we got to play golf together. So the whole thing was so funny in that we get on the golf course, we get on the first tee, and we're waiting for Gary. And Gary, where the hell is Gary? Gary's not showing up yet. So Now we're looking. So Bruce is going crazy. We got to tee off. We got to get this thing going.
Yeah, so we had a tee time. We were people waiting to tee off. Yeah.
So Gary comes, and we figure out who should be up first. So Gary goes up first, and he starts swinging his club, and he's missing the ball. And we look at each other and say, "Wait a second, this is going to be a long game." And Bruce asked him a simple question, "Gary, are you left-handed or right-handed?" He said, "Bruce, I'm right-handed." "Well, then why the hell do you got a left-handed set of clubs?" The guy picked up the wrong clubs at the clubhouse. So Bruce had to go back. He went back to there, got him a right pair of gloves, and then we proceeded on. But we laughed so much, and to this day we laugh so much. But the whole point here is that Bruce he brings a balance of fun and laughter to every team meeting and with every visit, because that's so powerful.
So yeah, that was fun, and Gary Toy laughs about that to this day. He thought that was funny. There's a couple of things. He felt like he was playing with the bosses, and if you remember, Bird had to go find him. So reason he grabbed the wrong clubs. They gave him them, and he thought he was holding us up, so he didn't want to hold us up anymore. So I just play with the left-handed clubs, and I said, "If you're right-handed, we'll wait." I promise you, that was a great story.
Yeah,
that was good.
Let me go back to one other point about that's kind of relevant about my success. I operate with the qualities that we talked about are there, but there's also I refer to them as my 10 commandments of how I operate. That kind of like guides my principles. Those things are very relevant to me, and I do them in a natural way. So it's hard for me to like say, "Have you done this?" or "Did I do that?" It just sort of comes naturally. But those 10 commandments or those 10 steps are: one is, build trusting relationships with people. Okay, understanding the goal with the end in mind. Like, where do you want to get to? What do you want to do? Right? You got to build a plan, I call it an action plan. And understand in that action plan, understand the change implication to people, process, and technology. You need to demonstrate a commitment. As part of the relationship building, you need to build a mutual respect with others. You need to be recognized as a team player. I was with Steve Tidlow one meeting, and he said, "If there's anybody I want on my team, it's going to be Pisano." Okay, so, and that goes to me about, the softball teams and the baseball teams. Number 7 is like, you want to surround yourself with strong talent, good resources, talented resources. Be an effective communicator with people. Be sensitive to the internal politics. Every organization has its politics, but you just need to be sensitive to it. You don't need to be a part of it. You just need to be sensitive to it. And the last thing is, I think, is a kind of like a theoretical point. Follow the RACI chart, and that is who's responsible, who's accountable, who do you need to inform as a consultant, and who needs to be informed. So those 10 principles is what led me to have a successful career. And I value those. And again, I do them naturally, and I think about them almost, I guess, naturally as I'm doing it, as I'm working, as I'm involved.
Your style was definitely methodical. You always had intention with everything you would do. Bob, tell me, I remember you called me one day. We'd been working together for years with friends, and you told me that you were about to have surgery. And so talk a little bit about what happened, and a little bit we'll get into what you've been through.
So Bruce, I'm glad you brought this up, because it's been a major change in my life. So my first point to people that are listening here is that you never know when you're going to have a life-changing event happen. You just never know. And in my case, in October of 19, I had a CAT scan done in my abdominal area to evaluate the diverticulitis that I had. But the gastrologist came in and said, "Hey, you don't have a problem with your colon. You got a problem with your pancreas." I said, "What?" My pancreas had cancer cells in it. This is October 2019. And with that, I then determined, who was going to do the surgery. I had a tough decision to make. Does the pancreas get removed partially or full? So the decision was that I'm going to have the entire pancreas removed. And that the reason is that I did not want a cloud over my head, a partial. There's a lot of pancreas surgeries. And if you don't have it done, then there's, pancreas cancer is deadly. So having the whole pancreas removed was a tough decision and the right decision, because I did not want to have a cloud over my head that there was a possibility that the cancer cells could still be in the pancreas and still be in me. So I had the whole pancreas removed along with 5 other organs. So immediately overnight, I became a type 1 diabetic and without a pancreas. And it required that the pancreas serves 2 functions. It serves as insulin provider and digesting your food. So now I take enzymes to help digest my food. So overnight, type 1 diabetic, insulin driven, pancreas out, and enzymes to help digest it. So for the past 2.5 years or so, I've now been operating that way. I have to manage my diabetes every day, 24 hours a day. I have been able to use technology. I've got connected to a meters that my blood sugar is measured, monitored every 5 minutes. But it's a life-changing event, and it happened so suddenly.
But you also had a lot of ups and downs after your surgery, because I know it was one thing after another and in the middle of that, Betty Ann had her issues as well, right?
Right. So there's 2 things happened after the pancreas surgery. Is 3 months later, Bruce, my colon perforated. So I had a colon perforation, and that required, when I got out of that surgery after 8 hours, was 4 drains and a colostomy bag. So the perforated colon was with me for a good 14 months. And I went through 5 major surgeries, 65 hours and 65 days total in the hospital, 25 hours of anesthesia, and I escaped death twice. The point here to say is that eliminating the cancer at the pancreas and not becoming septic after having drains in me for 20 days and changed over and over, I avoided death twice. I escaped death twice. But my point here is I escaped it and I'm alive. And the other thing that came about throughout my ordeal is in October of 20, Betty Ann became diagnosed with a rare cancer called Waldenstrom, and 1 in 6 out of 1 million people get this a year. It's a cancer in the bone marrow, and Betty Ann's got a high percentage of the bone marrow. Her bone marrow has this cancer cell. It affects her bone marrow, okay, which the cancer cell is in the bone marrow, which then affects her blood. She gets symptoms that result of that. So from my standpoint, I was hit with a pancreas, perforated colon, and now my wife. So that was a very trying time throughout this whole thing. And there are several reasons why I've become why I've come out of it. But that's what I was up against for the last 24 months.
Right. And I kept up with you. I called you. I remember one time calling you when I was on vacation in Florida. I don't know if you remember that. You were weak as a cat. I was worried to death about you. And then you told me about Betty Ann. So I want to circle back that I have no doubt that every time I talked to you, and sometimes you were weak as a cat, whether you were talking about Betty Ann's illness or your illness, and I could barely, you were not the same voice that I've heard. How many conversations have we had over the years? Because you were so weak, but you were so positive. I mean, and I remember telling my wife, if you can beat this for being positive, he's going to beat it. I'm sure you had to have some moments that you wondered what the heck was going to happen, but that positive attitude that you had in your business career bled over into this personal part. Is that true?
Yes, Bruce. Yes, the positive attitude was there. And I have to say, I think there's 3 other things. There are 3 things that kind of come together about coming out of this. One is Betty Ann's support, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Betty Ann was my wife. She was my partner. She was my
nurse.
She was my patient advocate, and she was my communicator to the doctors, nurses, and practitioner nurses. Because there were times I was out of it, right? I couldn't, do anything. So she represented me in a lot of ways. So that support and the trustworthiness of her telling them, the doctors and everybody else, what I needed, what I was doing, what was happening to me. So that was one main reason. The second reason is that the network of family and friends and SCI associate support with the prayers that came with it were very powerful and influential. When you've got all this around you that's powerful, of all the support, an army of prayers for you, that's powerful. And by the way, Bruce, I felt those prayers. I felt that support. It's very difficult to say you feel an intangible quality, right? You can't feel something that's intangible. But in this case, I can honestly say to you, and those that are listening, when you have that degree of support and you have that army of support, so to speak, you feel it. And that was very impactful. And then the third thing I think in all is that just believing in God, just believing in the prayers that I said to myself, just believing that God had a different purpose for me, had a different plan for Betty Ann and I. Betty Ann escaped death in 2015. I escaped death twice, 2020. And therefore, I believe that God has a different plan for us. I don't know what that is, but what it is doing is allowing me to spend more time with Betty Ann. It's allowing me to spend more time with my 6 grandsons and sons. It allows me to be taking care of my father at 99 years of age. So I think
and the other thing, several years ago, we didn't have the technology that we have that you can still work and make a difference being at home. That we had to learn that in a hurry during COVID. What a story! And
Bruce, the thing about technology is that when I was in a hospital, I was in a hospital during COVID. So Betty Ann wasn't with me. So the only way I communicated with Betty Ann was through the phone, through pictures of her, right on the phone. So that enabled me to communicate with Betty Ann, but she wasn't with me. So that was another difficult thing. Yeah. You think about, what advice would I give to someone about how do you come about this? You just got to pray and believe. You got to fight through every day and recognize that tiny, tiny steps identify progress. And just acknowledge that the healing process takes time and recovery is slow. Just stay focused in the moment on what you're doing and avoid potholes and negative thoughts. Just stay focused on getting better. And a little bit like you've done, listen to music. They're uplifting. It keeps your spirits going.
Well, you said something earlier about one of your 10 things or 10 commandments you walk by was you operate with the end in mind. And, I wrote a book, View from a Hearse, and that really, the whole purpose of it is that when you make decisions with the end in mind, it changes everything. If you make a decision based on what the result's going to be tomorrow, you can do that, and sometimes you can, and sometimes you need to. But if you're really consistently making decisions with the end in mind, it changes everything. And I think in listening to you, what happens to anybody, and by the way, it's not many people to get to be on a podcast that were 2.5 or 3 years ago diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. So you're one of the few. And so you're right. God had to intervene. He's got a purpose. It wasn't a mistake, and he ain't through with either one of you. All this puts everything you ever did in perspective. All of a sudden, you're running and gunning, and all the stuff you've done with the company, all of a sudden you're faced with mortality, and it puts everything in perspective, and it makes you better at what you do for a living, because you're thinking more about the end in mind than you ever did before. Isn't that true?
Yeah, and the end in mind, and just believing what you got.
Bob, I tell you, and for you and Betty Ann both, I can't tell you how much I appreciate your friendship. I appreciate the impact you've had on me and my career. I thank God that both of you are doing well. Thank God that you're sitting here telling this story. And what a story. Bob, thank you so much. Betty Ann?
I just want to say thank you so much for doing this, Robert. It means a lot to him. Yeah. And I enjoyed listening to him because I learned some things too also.
This will be preserved forever. For your great-grandchildren you haven't even met yet, will get to hear about their great-grandpa Robert.
You know, there's a lot of people that have an influence in our lives, so I have to acknowledge that Betty Ann has been a major influence in my life, right? For
Sure.
50 plus years. Okay, so that's an important that, and that's sort of unique today with a lot of people's marriage that not lasting as long. So you and I, with Kathy, your wife, and us, we're very fortunate to have connected with the right person.
Absolutely.
Okay? So that's a positive. And so Betty Ann has been my ace and my mentor in a different way. But at the end of this, Bruce, clearly we've worked together. I learned a lot from you. You're very special in what you bring to the table. Is you know the business, but you also know people, and you have a positive way of interacting with people and making them feel good. So clearly I want to thank you for creating this opportunity to discuss my story. And at the same time, Bruce, I was able to reflect on my entire life. This was, the last 48 hours I've just had, how do I put this together to help make this thing powerful?
Right.
And so that was good. And I think this podcast, will be my story for your listeners. But as you just mentioned, it will also serve as a legacy for my family and especially my grandchildren and children. So
yep.
All I can say is that it's all good, my friend.
Viewing life from a hearse, it could be worse. Laugh, think, and cry with the country undertaker.